I liked it.
Me too.
That was good.
Alright, who's next?
It's on mine now.
Yeah, why not? Or do you want to wait for it to be dark?
I want to wait for it dark, actually. Yeah.
Alright.
Anyone else got one?
Mr. Oster, can you tell us
not
one
really
of your poems? Yes, go, Alyssa, go.
Really scary. It's more unnerving than anything.
Woo!
It's about cats. It's cats.
Oh no, not the cats.
Did they come back?
The very next day.
Oh no!
So, an old man was out for a walk when a storm came up. He looked for a place to take shelter, and soon he came to an old house. He ran up to the porch and knocked on the door, but nobody answered. By now the rain was pouring down, thunder was booming, and lightning was flashing. So he tried the door, and when he found it unlocked, he went inside. Except for a pile of wooden boxes, the house was empty. He broke up some of the boxes and made a fire with them. Then he sat down in front of the fire and dried himself. It was so warm and cozy that he fell asleep. When he woke up, a black cat was sitting near the fire. He stared at him for a while, and then it purred. That's a nice cat, he thought, and then he dozed off again. When he opened his eyes, there was a second cat in the room. This one was as big as a wolf. It looked at him very closely and asked, "Shall we do it now?" "No," said the other cat. "Let's wait till Thomas comes." I must be dreaming, thought the old man. Closed his eyes again.
Get fucking
Another
ganked
look.
by some cats.
But now, there was a third cat in the room. This one was as big as a tiger. It looked the old man over and asked, "Shall we do it now?" "No," said the others. "Let's wait till Thomas comes." The old man jumped up and jumped out the window and started running. When Thomas comes, you tell him that I couldn't wait.
God damn.
I want to know how.
Oh.
That was weird.
I liked it.
Where are you going?
No.
He's not waiting around for Thomas to come. He's going to the right idea. He's going.
Doesn't want to stick it out for Thomas.
Shall we do it now? No, let's wait till Thomas comes.
Oh.
You know, I actually might get Godfrey to take care of the cat for me.
Don't you, Godfrey is not allowed near that
I've lost cat privileges, I believe.
What?
What
cat? Didn't Mr. West lose cat privileges too?
Do not.
Well, my privileges have been gone for a while.
The floor with your cat. I know it seems.
Do not let Godfrey touch your cat.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
what-
no, that's
What the heck?
I watched Clyde do that once.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
I
that.
have a story if no one else wants to go.
Yes, go.
Yes.
Okay.
This one's called Identical Twins.
Oh no.
Ooh.
Oh. Okay.
Hopefully none of you here have an identical twin, because I'm sorry.
I absorbed mine in the
Only you have
womb,
high
so I feel
suspicion
alright
from
about
now
it.
on.
What the heck?
Damn, Dr. Jacobs.
Yeah. That's what happened to the potato. It got absorbed.
No, not the potato.
Oh no.
No.
Eventually, everyone experiences that terrible feeling of lost when a loved one dies. The death of a parent is something everyone has to go through. It feels hard.
Jobo and the potato.
Like a knife piercing straight through your heart. The death of a brother or sister is even worse, especially if it happens when you were young. Even worse is that of a death of a child. Life almost comes to a stop. It's somehow unnatural. Parents are not meant to outlive their However, there is one thing that is more painful than all the above. It's the death of an identical twin. When your identical twin passes away, it feels almost as if you have died as well. Two sisters, were always very close. People constantly got them confused. They were identical twins. Instead of being annoying, it was rather amusing. It gave them an opportunity to get up into all sorts of mischief. They could always have fun posing as each other, causing as much confusion as possible. May and Kay, Kay and May, that's what they called them. Home? They shared the same bedroom, played in the same backyard. At school, they were in the same class and hung out with the same group of friends. After graduation, they went to the same university, and they were roommates in the same exact place. They even fell in love with the same guy, which is really strange if you think about
Problematic.
it. But he eventually chose her, not me. However, he still managed to get them confused with his sister almost every day. Always amused them. Never had much luck with men, said her. She was the attractive one, and even though they looked exactly the same, May somehow was the more attractive personality. It was always the popular one.
Oof.
After graduating university, she got married, and soon after that she had a baby, which made the other one an aunt. Now, her sister had two people who loved her, and she had none. She was always the lucky one. They say if one identical twin is in pain, the other can feel it, even if they are hundreds of miles away. Don't believe it. That simply isn't true. Her sister never experienced her pain, never knew the turmoil that started eating her up from the inside. She was oblivious to it all. And as her life went from success to success, hers was spiraling out of control. She was happy, and the other became depressed. The happier she became, the more the depression began to grow in the other sister, almost overwhelming. She never felt her pain. She never understood the loss. It's strange to look at your own grave. A place where you know someday you'll be laid to rest. It's even stranger to see yourself in some sort of picture or painting on a gravestone, with the dates of your birth and death engraved below it. May Phyllis, born 4/21/1906, died randomly. Beloved daughter, dear sister, not one word of it is true. It was after 2 a.m. when the phone started ringing. Her husband rolled over in bed and groaned, posed herself and answered the phone. In a sleepy sewed voice, she said, "Hello." There was a man voice on the other end. "Okay, Phyllis," he asked. "Yes," she replied. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I have some terrible news. Your sister May was found dead 2 hours ago. I need you to come down to the morgue and identify the body. Life comes to a halt. Time stops. Part of you is gone forever. That's what it means to be a twin." She didn't cry. She was still in a state of shock. She just couldn't squeeze out the tears. That's what everyone said. "How did it happen?" she asked. "She was murdered," the policeman said. "Stabbed 10 times in the chest. Found her in the alley just around the corner from the office where she worked." And that's when the tears started. She was weeping so much she could barely tell her husband what happened. Next morning she drove to the police station, identified her sister's body. It was her, of course. How could she fail to identify her? Same arms, same legs, same body, same face. It was like looking at yourself in the mirror. Laid out on a cold table in the morgue, totally naked with only a sheet to cover her. Afterwards, the police wanted to ask some questions. They had ruled out robbery as a motive. They said whoever killed her for a reason. He wanted her dead, stabbed her 10 times in the heart. The thing he stole was her random telegraphs, her notes, and everything else. So you said the last time you saw your sister was 2 weeks ago. Detective, questioning her, because it seemed a little suspicious. She nodded. We weren't on speaking terms. She was angry with me. Didn't want to speak to me. She was always angry with me, and I don't know why. So in the last 2 weeks, he pressed again. We didn't talk to each other by any means. Telegram, note, postmiss, nothing. Didn't arrange to meet up. She shook her head again, unable to get the words out. Detective had been a little surprised to learn they were not only sisters, but also identical twins. He wondered if there was a chance the killer had got them confused. They accidentally murdered the wrong one by mistake. That would complicate things even more. It meant there'd be twice as many suspects, one crime, but twice as difficult to solve. "Do you know of anyone who would wanted to harm her?" he asked. No one. I don't have any enemies, neither did she. And after leaving the police station, she got on a horse and ran away.
Roger, thank you for the follow.
There were no tears, she just wanted to laugh. She took out all the telegrams and notes her sister had left her. Yeah, of course I can meet you today. What time do you get off work? She started to burn the letter, tossing it into the fire, and read another one. I'm outside your place, where are you? She started to burn even more letters. It's just like every single telegram that came through was the same as another. Where are you? I'm scared. I'm alone. Why are you doing this? She was buried in a grave with my name. Our names were the only things that ever distinguished us. Now there's nothing to tell us apart. It's so funny, so very, very funny, left her a note. My husband is sleeping peacefully in my bed beside me, unaware that his wife is dead.
What the
It's a
fuck?
sad day, but it feels like the first day of the rest of my life. Sorry, Kay. Sometimes it's necessary to make sacrifices in order to get the things that you rightfully belong to you.
What
You had
the
everything, and now it belongs all to me, said the note. But you know what they say, even though twins are identical, there's always something that distinguishes them. My daughter's lying in her crib, but she won't go to sleep. She keeps staring at me. There's a strange look on her. She could tell there's something wrong. She knows who I really am. She's the only one who knows. But she can't tell anyone anymore. It's unfortunate she won't survive the night.
What the
But by the time she was old enough to speak, she would have forgotten that I'm not really her mother.
Whoa.
Well, that turned.
Wow.
Fuck.
Okay.
That was awesome. I'm so sad.
Yeah.
Creepy.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Good job,
Real
Mr.
question is
Alistair.
that June or Lexa? No, I'm gonna stop now.
What the heck?
Oh, she's not awake, is she? Okay, we're good.
Ow. What are you looking for?
God damn.
Yay. No, I'm just excited that all the the churches and stuff are on.
You're crawling around.
Out.
Careful, careful.
Also, fire
I'm
burns.
just sneaking
Fire.
back
Fire
because I
hot.
had to run away.
Yeah, fire is hot.
Well, you're terrible at sneaking back because I heard you. Though you are
Well,
very
Else
good at
got one.
sneaking away. I didn't hear you leave.
And you know it's got a scary story.
I'm just
I
along for
haven't
the
had
ride.
Please do.
Go for stuff.
It's getting dark too.
Perfect.
Love it.
This is the story of the White Gown.
Oh. The white cat.
There once was a young woman, very lonely. She desperately wanted to find herself a boyfriend. The only problem was that she had very little money, so she never went anywhere, and she never met anybody. One day she received an invitation to a party. The girl really wanted to go, but she didn't have any nice clothes to wear for such an occasion. She didn't even have enough money to buy a new dress. Why don't you buy a dress in the second-hand shop, her mother suggested. Girl went down to a second-hand shop not far from where she lived and managed to find a beautiful white satin evening gown. It fit her perfectly and was surprisingly cheap. She immediately bought it and rushed home. That night, when she arrived at the party, the girl looked so radiant that all eyes were on her. Every single man at the dance was desperate to meet her. She danced with one handsome man after another and was having a wonderful time. She began to feel that her luck was changing for the better. Soon, however, she began to feel very dizzy and faint. She had trouble staying on her feet, and she asked one of the young men to help her downstairs. When she got home,
Horse.
she crawled up the stairs and laid down on her bed. The next morning, the girl's mother knocked on her door, but there was no answer. When the woman opened the door, she found her daughter lying lifeless on the bed.
Oof.
She called for the doctor, but it was no use. By the time he arrived, the girl was already dead. The doctor examined her, but he couldn't understand what had killed her, so he asked the coroner to perform an autopsy. It turned out that the girl had been poisoned by embalming fluid. Tests were done and traces of embalming fluid were found on the white gown. Because she was dancing so much, she started sweating, and embalming fluid entered her pores and slowly stopped her blood flowing. Police questioned the owner of the second-hand shop. He said he'd bought the gown from an undertaker's helper. He'd stolen it from the body of a dead girl just before she was buried.
Hmm. Now that is a scary story to tell in the dark.
Wow,
Well, shit.
that is
I love it.
Oh, that was great.
Amazing.
That was messed up.
Ow.
Who's next?
Hurry and tell your
Funky,
story.
too.
Yeah, I guess I can now.
It's amazing. I love it.
Getting
I
there,
love it. I love it.
everything.
Oh, spooky
I
land.
love the
Ooh,
trees,
spooky
the
lantern.
little jack-o'-lanterns.
Nessa, that was wonderful.
Okay.
These have eyes.
Oh,
Fa-
no. No.
A father was tucking his little boy into bed after a long day. The boy looked up to his father and said, "Daddy, check for monsters under my bed." Now the man had told his son many, many times that there was no such thing as monsters. Nevertheless, he nodded and smiled to the boy before getting down to the floor to peer underneath the bed for his amusement. Then he saw him, another him, boy, bed. He stared back at the man, quivering as he whispered, "Daddy, there's somebody on my bed."
Ew.
Ew, short. What do you mean, ew?
Creepy.
Well then. Who the fuck's over there? Who's that over there on the horse?
I have another one.
You go first, Sunny.
Wait,
Hi.
no, you go first.
Hello.
It's very.
Oh, I've got tons of stories. It's gonna matter
Oh,
which one you
well.
pick, really.
Really short.
Let's see, you go first, because I just told two.
Or is it Justice?
Very short.
Spooky story and had to stop. I love spooky.
Oh, of course. You
Oh.
get
Well,
free-
you're welcome
free
to
join
come over.
us. Yeah.
This is what we're doing tonight.
We have
Scary
spooky story night.
Take a seat.
If you can fall asleep tonight, we didn't do our job.
I love it.
I live with a doctor. I'll take a lot on him. It's fine.
One is called The Voice.
Oh.
Just fallen asleep when she heard a strange voice. "Ellen," it whispered, coming up the stairs. First step. Now I'm on the second step. Ellen got scared and called her parents, but they didn't hear her and they didn't come. Then the voice whispered, "Ellen, I'm on the top step." Now I'm in the hall. Now I am outside your room. Whispered. To your bed. "I've got you." So Ellen screamed, and then the voice stopped. Her father rushed into the room with a candle lit. "Somebody is in here," Ellen said, but they looked and looked. Nobody was there.
Wow.
The heck? That's
Um,
scary. If I ever hear nope,
I would leave.
Nope.
never come back ever.
Out the window I go.
It's like sunny
Me
in
too.
your room.
No, that's
No, don't. No,
Stop.
send candles. No, I don't want something talking to me and telling me that it's coming for
Sunny,
me.
I'm under your bed.
Wow.
No, I think Jim would kill me if I were anywhere in Sunny's room. But
Yeah, probably.
It's fine. It's okay. Because I'll just sleep with her tonight. I have another one. It's also kind of short. A man went to a hotel and walked up to the front desk to check in. The woman at the desk gave him his key and told him on the way to his room there was a door with no number that was locked and no one was allowed in there. Especially, no one should look inside the room under any circumstances. so he followed the instructions of the woman at the front desk, going straight to his room and going to bed. The next night, his curiosity would not leave him alone about the room with no number on the door. He walked down the hall to the door and tried the handle. Chef, it was locked. He bent down and looked through the wide keyhole. Cold air passed through it, chilling his eye. The hall was a hotel bedroom, like his, and in the corner was a woman whose skin was completely white. She was leaning her head against the wall, facing away from the door. He stared in confusion for a while. He almost knocked on the door out of curiosity, but decided not to. He crept away from the door and walked back to his room. The next day, he returned to the door and looked through the keyhole. This time, all he saw was red. He couldn't make out anything besides the distinct red color. Perhaps the inhabitants of the room knew he was spying the night before and had blocked the keyhole with something red. At this point, he decided to consult the woman at the front desk and ask for more information. She sighed and said, "Did you look through the keyhole?" The man told her he had, and she said, "Well, I might as well tell you the story. A long time ago, a man murdered his wife in that room, and her ghost still haunts it. These people were not ordinary. They were white all over except for their eyes, which were red."
Oh. That one gave me shivers.
Sonny!
Yeah,
Sorry!
that's what got me.
I'll put my head down here.
Anybody else?
Sit down, Mr. Seven.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Hi. There's food if you want some snacks. We're in this pantry.
Okay, thank you.
Caramel apples and candy apples and hot apple cider and s'mores and popcorn and witch's brew.
I don't have any stories.
Hello.
Ciao.
Hi!
Ciao.
Hey, Haku.
Ciao.
Hey, Cheyenne.
Hello.
So
Are you
bye.
guys here for the scary stories?
This is crazy.
Sit down.
Yeah, come on, join us.
Like I said, I got 1,000,000 of them. As long as you want to
Please
keep hearing
go,
them, I'll
yes.
keep telling them.
I want to keep hearing them.
Of
Let's
course.
go.
Mhm.
Me too.
You go again, Alistair. Then I got another one.
I'm so excited.
Since we're on the topic of hotels, let's keep rolling with that one.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Okay, if this one gets me, if I ever get thrown in the creepy closet again, I'm never coming back to Keystone.
Don't fall asleep.
The bed and
This one
breakfast.
is called The Landlady.
The landlady.
Uh-oh.
A 17-year-old boy named Billy Weaver went to London to find a job. When he got off the train, carrying his suitcase, he went looking for somewhere to stay for the night. There was a line of tall houses on each side of the street, and all of them looked exactly identical. Billy noticed a sign in one of the windows that read, "Bed and Breakfast." He crossed the street, peered through the window. There was a fire burning in the hearth, and a little dog was curled up asleep on the carpet. He saw the room was nicely furnished. The piano, big sofa in the corner, and there was a parrot in the cage. Looked like a nice place to stay. He knocked on the door several times before he even had time to take his finger off the door. The door swung open, and a middle-aged woman was standing there. She gave him a little bit of a fright. She seemed okay in the end. Come in, she said, welcome, smiling. Billy went inside, and she closed the doors behind him, locking it tight. I was looking for a room for the night, he said, and noticed your sign. She's like, don't worry. It's all ready for you, my dear, she said. She took his coat, hung it up in the hallway. £5 a night, including breakfast. It was very cheap. The woman seemed nice and friendly. She reminded him of his mother. We have the place to ourselves, she said. Well, almost. And she led the way upstairs. It isn't very often to have visitors, you see. I'm inclined to be just a teensy-weensy bit choosy in particular. I like my guests to be homely, young, and particularly nice, so that they don't cause any trouble. Billy followed her up to the second floor. Here's your room, she said. I do hope you like. Thank you, said Billy, seeming a bit tad off, but still willing to go with it. The bed was made and the bedclothes had been neatly turned back on one side, all ready for someone to get in. I'll leave you to unpack your things, she said. Then you can come downstairs and sign the guest book. She gave him a little wave of the hand, and he quickly went out the room and closed the door. The landlady was a bit odd, but that didn't bother Billy. After all, she was harmless, and she was obviously a kind and generous soul. After unpacking his suitcase and washing his hands, he went downstairs. In the living room, the fire was still burning on the hearth, and the little dog was still sleeping in front of it. The guest book was lying open on the piano, so he picked up the pen and wrote down his name and address. There were 2 other entries above him on the page. One was a Christopher McCullen from Cardiff, and one was Gregory Temple from Bristol. That's funny, he murmured to himself. Those names ring a bell. Where have I heard them before? Such charming boys, said a voice from behind him, scaring him again for the second time that night. He turned around to see the landlady coming into the room with a tea tray in her hands. He was a little confused. He said, I'm sure I've read those names before in the newspaper. They're famous, weren't they? She said, famous? Oh no, I don't think they were famous. They were just young and handsome, my dear. Exactly like you. Come over here now, dear, and sit down beside me on the sofa and have a nice cup of tea before you go to bed. It'll soothe your worries and you won't have to worry about anything anymore. You can fall asleep, just the way you are. I'm almost positive it was in the newspapers. I saw them, he said. I'll think of it in a second, I'm sure I will. She's like, come over here now and sit next to me and warm yourself in front of this fire. Come on, your tea's all ready for you. She patted the empty space beside her on the sofa. She sat there smiling at Billy. He sat down on the edge of the sofa. As far away as he could, she placed the teacup on the table in front of him. There we are. Isn't this nice and cozy? Billy started sipping his tea. She did the same, and for a while neither of them spoke, but Billy could feel her eyes watching him. Mr. Mulholland was a great one for his tea, she said at length. Never in my life have I ever seen drink as much tea as dear, sweet Mr. McMullen. When did he leave? Billy asked. Leave? He never left. He's still here. Mr. Temple is also here. They're on the 3rd floor. Both of them. Together. Billy thought that was strange, but he set his cup down slowly on the table and stared at the landlady. She smiled back at him and patted his knee. How old are you, my dear? 17. 17, she cried. Oh, it's the perfect age. Mr. McMullen was also 17. Tyler was also 17. But he was a bit shorter. Oops, I meant Temple, not Tyler, sorry. It was on his body. Did I do it again?
No.
Dang it. Okay.
Yeah.
Billy picked up his cup and took another sip of the tea. He stared at the parrot in the cage and noticed it wasn't moving at all. Is that parrot stuffed? He asked. You know something? Had me completely fooled. I could have swore it was alive. Who did it? She's like, oh, me? I stuff all my pets. You see my little basil here curled around my feet? Also stuffed. Billy looked at the dog curled up in front of the fireplace, and suddenly he realized the whole time it was just as silent and motionless as a parrot. He reached out and touched the dog. It was hard and cold and stiff, perfectly stuffed, almost remarkable. Wow, he said, not scared at all, but slightly impressed. That must be very difficult. Not at all, she said. I stuff all my pets when they pass away. Just like I said, I stuff everyone who passes away in my hotel. He's like, that was weird. He said, would you like another cup of tea? And he said, no, thank you. He didn't like the tea. It had a strange taste, something like bitter almonds. The room was beginning to feel very hot. Billy was having trouble catching his breath. I'm glad you signed the guest book, said the landlady, because I'm very forgetful, and later on, if I forget what you were called, I can almost come down here every day and look it up. I do that every day with Mr. Holland and Mr. Temple, Billy said. Haven't there been any other guests except them in the last 2 years? Oh no, my dear, like I said, I'm very choosy. And right now, you're my only guest. At least for now. And then you'll join them upstairs in my little tiny room. Stuffed, pristine, 17 forever.
Oh.
I mean, I saw it coming, but still, Jesus Christ.
I like the part where you changed it to Tyler instead of Temple.
We should maybe run around really quick and then return.
That's actually a good idea.
He's gone. We gotta run or somebody stop.
Don't let the ghosts get you.
I think I'm running away from the...
Stop him or stuff him? What did you say?
Yeah.
Stuff him.
Stuff him.
Uh-oh.
put him in the Wrangler quarters.
Did someone fall asleep?